Ladies and gentlemen, I'm ecstatic that I've been given the chance to address the elegant guests in this room today. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your epic support to me during this ongoing trial in Egypt. In prison, I've imagined myself many a times among you all, celebrating my freedom. I wish I was in the room in person today to salute you all. I hope you're enjoying your wine and champagne, and I'm not just saying this to prove to the judge that I'm not a Muslim Brotherhood. This time last year, I was sitting in my dingily solitary confinement cell in the terrorist wing, wondering if I had been forgotten. My broken shoulder made the experience even more traumatic. Snippets of news smuggled into my cell were my only window to the outside world. Reading about the efforts and the attention of free press advocates, dedicated diplomats, and members of parliament in Canada is what kept me going as I waited for any light of hope. I was not really aware, though, about the magnitude of the unprecedented global support until I was released. It seemed like an uprising against the suppression of the press, and it became evident that I was now not just fighting for my freedom, but also for a much bigger cause. We members of the Fourth Estate spend a lifetime challenging the government people vote for, not only because we can. I personally have taken on this job hoping that I can make a difference. The only reason I left Canada after college was to be right here on the front lines, reporting the conflicts of the Middle East. So my mother asked me in 2003 why I was rushing to Iraq on the first day of the war. I promised her after my one-year mission that I was never, ever going to expose her to such pain again. Of course, she continued to ask me that question throughout my modest 15 years in the field, as I entered Libya, Syria, Lebanon, and other conflict zones, and each time my answer was, again, that it would be the last time. My mother and fiancé, who have been seen me shackled to jihadists, dragged into the cage, and sentenced to 7 years, still wonder why I do it. Today, I'm out on bail, and that same awesome mother of mine is just about ready to disown me as I speak to you all, hoping that I would tone down my rhetoric. The truth is that my imprisonment has reminded me that I'm still a luckier journalist than many other friends who have been beheaded in Syria on the hands of ISIS, like my late friend Steven Sotloff, who had visited me in Egypt before heading to Syria. His death came as a major blow to me in prison, especially that I lived in the same wing of jihadists that celebrated his slaying. Indeed, reporting in the Arab media landscape has become like walking into a minefield. Some of us are killed, kidnapped, injured, or imprisoned, or both. I have learned to live with a permanent disability in my arm due to an injury exacerbated in prison. Several officers in prison who insisted on handcuffing me to jihadists ignored my injury. They used to joke and say, "You're a journalist, why do you need the arm for? Don't you just type and write?" Well, I didn't think it was funny back then. In the terrorism wing, what seems to be unfortunate to others was at the beginning a blessing for me. Living under one roof with Al-Qaeda and ISIS 24 hours a day was a schooling for a journalist who's always on the prowl like myself. I know reporters who literally died trying to get close to these lunatics, who justify their actions while promoting a perverted version of Islam. So my colleagues and myself started a mock radio show called Al Jazeera Live as we interviewed the prisoners in the wing from behind the bars. It was not just a form of entertainment, but a lifetime exclusive interview with the most dangerous, the most mean jihadists, the presidential team of the ousted MB president and his whole cabinet. Suddenly, the prison life became more bearable. Living among such haters of modernity and the democracy we embrace as human beings has left me more determined than ever to fight their ignorance and extremism with my pen and camera. What also can't be tolerated is that this so-called war on terror has become an excuse to crack down on civil liberties and journalism, which I call a partial war on journalists. I see no better occasion than today to remind the world that there are more than 220 journalists currently languishing behind bars. I believe both governments and media networks need to instate new regulations to better protect journalists and members of the media from prosecution. My case is the best example of how politics and journalism have become so interrelated. The mere fact that Qatar, the owner of Al Jazeera, does not consider the MBS terrorists, while Egypt does, is the main reason why I am on trial. Because this case is so politically motivated, I need Canada's support more than any other time. The President of Egypt allowed the transfer of foreign prisoners to their home countries. I was asked by the Egyptian National Security Advisors to renounce my citizenship in order to be deported, like my Australian colleague. I wish no one to be placed in a position like mine to have to choose between freedom versus nationality. Indeed, I did renounce my citizenship, but the saga continues, and I am still in the soundproof cage enduring a horrific case. I was angry for the longest time, but I am a believer that everything happens for a reason, and this diplomatic blockade has invoked a new sense of pride as I fight the battle for exoneration. During the last session, the technical committee declared that our videos were not fabricated, which is a huge victory. However, anyone following the Egyptian political scene will tell you that there is this sort of retaliatory spirit against the MB. I could easily compare it to the McCarthyism of the 60s in the US. So when I stand in front of the judge, I still worry about returning back to prison despite the lack of evidence. I hope Canada understands that underreported tension between Egypt and Qatar could land me back in prison, and this is when I repeat my request again, hoping that our government keeps an open dialogue with President Sisi as we approach the verdict in June. If I'm wrongly sentenced, I hope to be extracted to Canada before spending a day in prison. I have to thank members of Canada's prestigious opposition for keeping my plight alive. Thank you, Mr. Justin Trudeau, Mr. Thomas Mulcair, and Mr. Marc Garneau for your support, and many others. I express my special gratitude to Mr. Paul Dewar, whom I believe is among the guests tonight. If you are Paul, then I owe you a passport. I don't know why Canada rejected issuing me a new replacement Canadian passport in the first place, and I still don't know why they changed their mind and agreed to issue me one. However, I believe it was the collective efforts of my lawyers, members of the press, and of course members of Parliament in the room who have vouched for me. I can't be a journalist for the time being due to my ongoing case. However, I have positioned myself as a free press campaigner and hope to use the momentum of the case to advocate for journalists behind bars worldwide. My newly founded nonprofit foundation, registered federally, is currently holding a free press rally on May 3rd, on World Press Freedom Day, outside the Vancouver Art Gallery. We will focus on the plight of American journalist Jason Rezaian, imprisoned on bogus espionage charges in Iran, photojournalist Mahmoud Shawkan, detained in Egypt for almost 2 years with no charge, and the Qatari poet serving a life sentence in Qatar for criticizing the emir. The deputy mayor and the head of UBC Journalism School will be speaking at the rally, and Jason's brother is flying from the US to speak as well. I hope you all recognize their plight and support them. The right to report freely and safely is my foundation's motto, and I think that is why we are all here today. Thank you, Mr. Sean McCarthy, for the Press Freedom Award you presented to me last year. It could not have come at a better time. I stood in front of the judge on World Press Freedom Day and reminded him that the world is watching. Thank you again for giving me this chance to speak. In prison, I dreamt many times about Vancouver's skyline, strolling down St. Catharines in Montreal's gorgeous summer, and enjoying the cheese fondue up in Whistler. The embassy staff in Egypt brought me maple syrup back from Canada, but not the pancakes. I look forward to enjoying the mundane things we take for granted in Canada, and to thanking you all in person. Enjoy your day, and once again, salute.